decided to become, and for a moment, there was that clean, quiet certainty in your chest that said, this time it holds. And then somewhere between 3 days and 3 weeks later, you caught yourself. Same reaction, same voice in your head, same flinch you've had since you were 9 years old. You didn't lose motivation. Something inside you overruled you. Carl Jung spent 40 years studying that exact moment. The moment a person changes their mind, and their mind changes it back. And what he found is almost the opposite of what you've been told. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the part of the psyche that cancels your new self-image, why it does it, what it thinks it's protected, and the one thing that has to happen before any affirmations, any visualization, any new identity will actually stay. I'm also going to give you 3 signals that tell you this is happening in you right now. Signals almost everybody reads as proof they're broken. They're not. They're proof it's working. But we have to take this in order, because if you are in the practice before you understand that mechanism, it doesn't just fail. It makes the old self-image stronger. And I'll show you exactly how that happens. Let's name the thing properly, because most people never do. It isn't that you stopped believing. It's that a belief you never consciously chose is still running underneath the one you did. Jung had a phrase for the way the mind handles this. He called it the counterposition. His observation was that the psyche is not a single voice. It's a system of opposites held in tension. And the moment your conscious mind takes a strong position, I am confident now. I am the kind of person money comes to. I am done being the one who gets left. An equal and opposite position rises from the unconscious to balance it. Not to sabotage you, to balance you. That's the part almost nobody says out loud. Think about what that means practically. The stronger the affirmation, the stronger the counterweight. You say, I am wealthy, with real force, and some quiet part of you answers back, just as forcefully, with the bank balance. You say, I'm not afraid of being abandoned. And that night you dream about someone walking away. You didn't manifest wrong. You triggered a correction. Here's a small example I think about a lot. Someone gets a promotion they genuinely earned. Within a month, they're working 80 hours a week, napping at people they love, sleeping bad. Everyone calls it stress. Jung would ask a different question. What did this person have to believe about themselves in order to accept the promotion? And what older belief did that override without permission? Because an identity you install over the top of an unexamined one doesn't replace it, it buries it. And buried things don't go quiet. They get louder. in a language you're not listening to, which brings us to the actual mechanism. Jung's word for the part doing this was the shadow. And I want to strip that word of its drama for a second, because the internet has turned shadow work into something gothic and mysterious. And it really isn't. Your shadow is simply everything about yourself that you decided, usually before you were 12, was not allowed, not evil, not demonic, just not allowed. The anger you learned to swallow, the need you learned not to shed, the ambition that got laughed at once and never came back. You didn't destroy those parts. You can't. You put them in a room and shut the door. And here's the thing about that room. It holds the veto. Because every one of those exiled parts formed around a decision that kept you safe at the time. The child who learned, if I want things too openly, I get humiliated, made a genuinely intelligent trait. That belief protected them. So 30 years later, when you stand in front of the mirror and announce that you now receive abundantly and effortlessly, you are not talking to a blank slate. You're talking to a system that has one job: keep him safe. And a 30-year record of doing that job by keeping you small. The new self-image doesn't get rejected because it's untrue. It gets rejected because it's unvouched for. Nothing in you has agreed to protect it yet. Now, this is where I lose some people, so stay with me. Repetition alone can make it worse. Jung observed something he called inende teledromin, a long word for a simple pattern. Push anything hard enough in one direction, and it converts into its opposite. You felt this. The diet that becomes the binge. The person who forces positivity for 6 weeks and then collapses into a week it can't explain. The harder you press the accelerator on the new identity, the harder the counterposition presses back. Until one day it wins outright. And you don't just return to the old self-image. You return underneath it, worse than you were when you started. And then you conclude something devastating and completely wrong, that you're the exception. That it works for other people and something in you is defective. You're not defective. You are arm wrestling yourself and call it discipline. Look at what's actually happening in the body when you repeat a statement you don't believe. There's a friction there, a tightening. Most people push through it because they've been told resistance means they're close to a breakthrough. Sometimes it does, but often that friction is information. It's the veto speaking in the only language it has. Jung's move was not to shout over it. It was to go and find out what it wanted. So, how do you know it's happening to you right now? 3 signals. You feel genuinely different for about 72 hours, and then it evaporates without a specific trigger. Nothing bad happened. It just went. A conscious decision with no unconscious backing has roughly a 3-day battery. If your changes keep dying on schedule, that's not weak willpower. That's a pattern. And patterns have causes too. The disproportionate reaction. Something small happens. An unanswered message. A tone of voice. Someone succeeding at the thing you want. And the response coming out of you is enormously bigger than the event. Jung would say, you're just been shown the exact location of the door. The size of the reaction marks the size of what's behind it. You're not being dramatic. You're being informed. 3. The quiet self-sabotage that arrives on time. Things go well, and then right on cue, you do the one thing that undoes it. You cancel. You pick the flight. You go silent for a week. Notice it's rarely random. It usually lands right when the new identity is about to become undeniable. That timing is the tell. Something in you is defending an old agreement about how good your life is allowed to get. If you recognized even one of those, I want to be clear about something. And I mean this. That recognition is not bad news. Every one of these signals is the unconscious making itself legible. You cannot negotiate with something you can't see, which is exactly what the last part is for. Jung's principle here was that you don't defeat the counterposition. You hold the tension between the two until something third appears. He called that the transcendent function. And it sounds abstract until you do, because it's actually very simple, slightly uncomfortable. Here's the practical version. 3 steps, 10 minutes. Step 1, write the honest sentence. Not the affirmation, the objection. Write down in plain language what the other part of you says back. I'll never actually be the person who has that. People like me don't get chosen. Whatever the real sentence is, and you'll know it's the real one, because writing it makes you slightly sick. Most people skip this because it feels like negativity. It isn't. You cannot integrate what you refuse to look at. Step 2, ask it what it was protecting. This is the whole practice, honestly. Ask the objection. What did believing this keep me safe from? Sit there until an answer comes, and it usually does. A specific memory, a room, a face, an age. Almost always, it's a genuine protection. Being disappointed, being visible, being laughed at again. The moment you can see the protective intent, the part stops being an enemy. And a part that isn't an enemy stops needing to veto you. Step 3, write the sentence that holds both. Not the objection, not the affirmation. The one that's true with both in the room. Something like, part of me still expects this to be taken away, and I'm building it anyway. Read that one back. Notice that there's no friction in your chest. That's the signal. That's the sentence your whole system can sign. That's what a self-image that holds actually feels like. Not louder, not more forceful, quieter. Because nothing inside you is arguing with it anymore. And here's the part. I want someone to have told me earlier. The goal was never to become a person with no doubt. That person doesn't exist. And chasing them is how you end up exhausted at 35 with a folder full of unused journals. Jung called the real goal individualization, becoming the whole of what you already are, including the parts you exiled. Not a better mask, a bigger room. And practically, on the ground, it looks unremarkable. You still get the flinch. You just don't obey it. The old belief still shows up, and it no longer gets a vote it hasn't earned. That's the version that lasts. Not because you overpowered anything, but because for the first time, you stopped running a campaign against yourself and started running an integration.